Welcome to the It's Time podcast with your host, Professor Dale Feinauer, from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business Graduate Programs.
Okay, we are here today with another podcast from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business Graduate Programs on for us, you will see this later, but on a cold January morning after we've had some very nice snow. And we're here with Holly Brenner, who is the Senior VP for C.D. Smith, and we are hopefully going to be adding some more fuel to your leadership fire today. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what you do for C.D. Smith? What is your role? Why do they pay you?
Well, to sum that up, it's growth related. So my role at C.D. Smith is to help us figure out strategically, where do we go next? You know, we're very fortunate as a company to have tremendous clients and a great base, have for 85 years. This is our 85th year, by the way. And so the challenge becomes, where do we go from here? So my role is to help increase the size of the pie by taking a look at what we're great at, where we already are, what kind of work and what kind of clients we really, knock it out of the park with and try to find more of them. So
okay.
That's my role.
So what's the niche and how do you get more in that niche that is your sweet spot in business?
That's a great way to sum that up, Dale.
Cool. Well, now I know that you got both your undergraduate degree and your MBA from Oshkosh, and you had absolutely amazing professors as an undergrad. We are joking here. I was one of her profs. And that I'm sure that was a piece of your journey to becoming the leader you are today. But in general, how did you become the leader you are today? What happened in life that got you to the position you are in now?
Everything.
Go on.
Everything that has happened in my life, even if at the time I was thinking, gosh, this is not where I wanted to be or what I want to be doing, all of those things, all of those experiences, all the people that I met really got me to where I am. I would say it started out before I even realized it started out when I was probably about 12, right? In competitive sports as a youth, I was in competitive roller skating. I know most of you have never heard of that, but it was a real thing.
Competitive roller skating?
Yes.
Now, this isn't roller derby, no. Like the movie kind of stuff.
No.
This is speed skating?
No, this is actually like figure skating.
Oh, okay.
So like that, but on wheels.
Okay.
And on wood floors rather than ice, because that would be a terrible combination otherwise. But as a young person, I was in competitive roller skating. So everything was what I put into that, I would get out of that. And we had a team, but it was an individual sport for the most part. Right. And so I realized, not until later, but while I was doing it, I realized that if I do more of this and practice more this way, then I fall less, which is great because falling hurts. And I would
There's better, nice immediate reinforcement.
Exactly. I would do better in the competitions. And also I would notice what was happening around me with my team, right? They would, if I stayed out there a little bit longer, well, they would stay out there a little bit longer and kind of this influence. I can't say I knew what it was at the time, but looking back, that was, I think, early leadership. And there was a really interesting, I still do not know what made me do this, but 8th grade, I was very shy. You would not have gotten me on this podcast as an 8th grader.
Really?
Absolutely not. But I decided, against all odds, to run for student class president. So it was a small private grade school, K through 8, and I went for it. So what I've learned since then is I'm a big fan of Dale Carnegie. And I think that a lot of where I am today and how I approach leadership in life is rooted in some of those very basic principles of focusing on people and caring about people for the right reasons. But anyway, I had my very own Dale Carnegie as my sister, right? So she was the person who had all of the friends. She had all of the network. She knew how to, get a group of people rallied around something. And thankfully for me, she chose me in this case, right? So she got people to rally around what was my platform at the time as an 8th grade student. And wouldn't you know it, before long, I was the president of our class. Again, not really knowing what that all meant, but understanding that there were important things that I could do. As an 8th grader, that was probably like filling the soda machine or whatnot. But still at the time, it was a big, bold step for me to take and something I never would have expected myself to do. So those are my couple of first early tastes of leadership and jumping in. But of course, beyond that, there's all of the things that happened in high school and college. I would point to the Cain Institute.
Mm-hmm. I remember the Cain Institute.
Yes. And through the Cain Institute, I had a lot of opportunities for internships and got to try things at many different companies, which was invaluable experience. So I would point to that specifically as a pivotal point for me in terms of trying to figure out what I wanted to be. And I don't think I knew at that time I wanted to be a leader, but I was gleaning skills that help you become a leader, right? So those are a few things, and I could go on. I don't know how far you want me to go here, Dan, but
well, we'll come back to it. Just the Kane Institute is an interesting one. For those of you who don't remember, Kane was a little while ago. This was a technology-driven thing. This was a thing that the university did to help businesses to get better at technology. This was way back when people were first having PCs, when WordPerfect was a new thing. Now, that was probably before you were doing it, but it was helping companies figure out how to use WordPerfect, how to use like an Excel spreadsheet, which has now become something that is much more routine, but it was a big thing back then. But it is something that the College of Business has tried to learn from, which is that getting people out. We now require as you know, we require all of our undergrads to do an internship, because we're convinced that getting people out, getting those early business and leadership experiences is formative.
I couldn't agree more with that.
Cool.
Approach.
So you did the Kane, you graduated, and then what happened? What was your first gig after undergrad?
Well, so that's an interesting story. So I graduated, and like most undergrads, you putting your paper out there, you're applying, you're trying to get scholarships, you're trying to make the whole thing work. This last four and a half for me years I spent racking up student debt. I wanted to make sure I was able to pay that off, right? So I had a few different opportunities, and I felt very fortunate at the time. It was a pretty decent market, and there were really two opportunities I looked at. One of them was for a international retail chain, and there was a district manager position. And this would, if you ask my family, this was the one I should have taken, right? But the spoiler alert is that I didn't. But everything about that opportunity said, yes, take it. It was the car, the big money at the time, the cool opportunity, the career ladder all laid out. And then there was this other opportunity that was much smaller, local company here in Oshkosh. And it was everything I thought I wanted in terms of opportunity. And I went for that. Again, I did the pros and cons. I'm a writer. I make lists. I do all those things. And against the better judgment of my trusted advisors, I went for this smaller opportunity. And I am so glad I did. It was definitely the right thing for me. It was an advertising agency. We specialize mostly in the food service business. So I got to spend time traveling domestically, and I learned a lot. There were some great people, really smart people in the advertising world. And I spent, 5 or 6 years doing that and got really traveled and mostly a business development account side role, and getting to see many other companies and how they work. So not exactly a consultant type role, but you get to see into a lot of different companies, which was neat.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Well, and you noted that you trusted your gut as opposed to maybe what the data said or other advisors said. Has that been a pattern in your career and in your life, that when push came to shove, you took a deep breath and trusted your gut?
Absolutely. I make my list. I do the black and white, but I'm not a black and white gal. Wasn't a finance major, accounting major, right? That was probably why I'm better suited for marketing and human resources. But absolutely, I've come to really trust myself. That was probably the first decision I made where it was big. The table stakes were pretty high for me, and I knew what my heart and my intuition was telling me, and it was polar opposite of what the black and white was. And so I did it. My parents were scratching their heads, that's for sure, but it was definitely the right choice. And I've done that consistently. And the more I do that, the easier it becomes, because I'm trusting myself, right?
And you've learned that
it's okay
you do what your gut thinks, and it tends to pay off. Well, and fascinatingly, they've actually now done some research where there's this question of trust your gut or do the logic. And the human brain can think of like 4 or 5 variables at a time and keep those in your head and be consciously thinking of them. But subconsciously, your brain can identify a dozen, 18. And so even if you can't consciously figure out why I think the smaller company makes more sense, it's not, your gut really is your identifying and thinking through things which the conscious brain doesn't know you're doing. So I've always been a fan of trusting your gut. And when I found that research, it was like, oh, cool. There's actually a reason to be doing this. It's not just I want to.
Here's why. The proof. I love that.
Yeah.
I love
so
that.
I thought that was fun. How would you describe your leadership style?
I would describe it, but I think people who I work with would also describe it as collaborative. I'm absolutely not afraid to make a decision, but I have learned that gaining consensus and some buy-in along the way, even if you have to make a decision that runs counter to what the majority says, if you've done the good work of seeking the buy-in, seeking the expert opinions of people who are in the roles, for example, or where it will be effective, wherever the impact will ultimately be, that there is more respect and appreciation for you went through the process. I understand you have a tough decision to make, so even if it's not what I've recommended, I know that you've been through that. So I think collaborative is one way to describe my leadership style.
Okay. So you're collaborative and you get lots of people's input, but in the end result, if I'm hearing this properly, when it's sort of in your bailiwick, you make the decision. Mm-hmm. And it's not always a majority rule.
Correct.
You do it because it's the right thing.
Correct. I have a moral compass. I try to stick to that always and then figure out what's the right thing for the company or the group or whatever organization or whatever the decision is regarding, right?
And how do you get those people, and maybe this is just what you refer to as part of the process, how do you get those people for whom you didn't take the direction that they thought made sense? How do you get those people on board to support and to work hard to make this decision successful?
That's a very loaded question and a great question. And I think it's all rooted in trust. And it's not a short process, right? So I think that if you can, in your life and in work, business and everywhere else, the more you can do to develop trust and to gain trust of people, the easier all of those things become. Because they know that I'm not making this decision just to mess with you, Dale.
That may be fun as a sidelight.
I could do that. And yeah, there's some entertainment value there. But at the end of the day, I'm making the decision because I believe it's the right one for the greater, whatever the greater good, the greater whole, whatever it is. And I think that's how I've been most successful in that. Again, it's not a short process. It's not an easy process, but I find it to be very worthwhile to make the effort of making sure people that I'm putting myself out there in a way that is trustworthy, worthy of their trust, that I'm showing respect. I'm showing that I value what you offer here. If there's something we need to talk through, I'm being direct. We're talking about that and on and on.
Okay. Well, and that often involves needing to build some relationship with these people, that you connect to them human to human, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. How do you address the question of sort of that connection? Particularly, we've got people who are new to leadership, first-time leader in an organization, and they've got some direct reports. And how do they think of the line between being friends with those people, building a relationship, but you also need to be the boss? So mm-hmm. I've been the boss of these folks for 6 weeks, and that seems to be working okay. And then some Friday afternoon, one of them stops by and says, "Hey, Fridays, we tend to go out and have beer after work. Would you go have a drink with your direct reports? Do you socialize with them? How do you draw the line?"
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And it is something that I think is more art than science. But again, if it comes down to being authentic and real, do I really care about you? So I tend to have a lot of empathy. I feel everything, which isn't always helpful, but generally it is a helpful thing. But I need to show up for you as really caring about you. You as a person. I want to know about your wife, about your kids, about what you did this weekend, but I also have to respect what you want from me, right? If you show up and you don't really want to tell me about all that stuff, I need to find other ways to build trust with you, because not everybody wants to, have a coffee clutch at 7 a.m. on Monday morning, right?
Right?
Some people do. And so I think part of the art and science is figuring out one for one, what do people appreciate? How do they want to be interacted with, and not trying to do here one size fits all in terms of communication and building rapport, building relationships. But it takes effort to do that.
I've heard people say that you don't lead people, you lead persons. And I think I just heard some of that in there. Does that resonate?
It does. I've never heard that exactly like that, but I think it does, because I have, a team of a dozen folks, direct reports, and each one of them is a little different. And if I tried to handle A and B the same, it would flop. And if I tried to average that out, it would also not hit the mark for any of them.
And how do you approach, and maybe some of this is by knowing the person, in the military, sometimes folks will talk about one of our things is to make sure the troops have dry socks. We got to take care of the troops. We also got to make sure we take the hill. And balancing the dry socks versus the hill, how do you balance taking care of your people, showing compassion, being empathetic, mm-hmm. one of your strong suits you've identified, maybe also a weak suit as somebody who has a lot of that as well. How do you balance that with organizational needs? How do you think of those two sometimes competing things?
It's kind of like, what's a good metaphor? A checking account, right? If you make some, deposits, that's good. It allows you to take more withdrawals, right?
Okay.
But if you're only taking withdrawals, you're going to be in trouble pretty soon, right? So I think it's not easy, but it's simple as that, right? Making sure that you're adding value, that you're showing respect, that you're giving that feedback and in a way that resonates, that you're not always giving one person all the undesirables or the attaboys, right? Or you're sharing the wealth in a genuine way. I think that's the key. Is if you're just handing them out because some book says you're supposed to hand them out, well, that'll be sniffed out before long. And I think that is it all goes back to trust. If people they trust you, they trust that I'm going to show up, they trust that the direction I'm offering is sound, and I've demonstrated that I've got their back, they're going to be more willing to go to battle, to continue with your metaphor, than if I didn't show up in that way. Right. If I was a fly by night, then they probably wouldn't be as willing to jump in.
So I'm hearing genuine, I'm hearing trusting, that you have to build a real relationship with these folks and you have to really be there for them. And if that's true, then a bunch of other stuff follows.
I believe that.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. What was your first leadership role, beyond roller skating, et cetera, but where you formally had direct reports? And what did you learn from that role?
Yes. So I was a vice president of marketing at the ripe old age of 26.
Wow.
And yes, I had achieved my dream job right there, right? 26.
26. It's all downhill from here.
I better get a bigger dream, right? But that was, so that was really, and this is another line of thinking conversation we could go down if we've got time, but just a title and what a title means and what a leadership means, right? They're not always the same thing, I think.
Okay.
So in that case, I had a title that was certainly a leadership title. I had a little bit of direct reporting, but it wasn't like I was leading the masses, right? It was more of here's a title because externally that meant something, right? So there's that. So I would say that was my first one of those. But then jumping forward, really, I would go to a more recent experience within healthcare. So I went from advertising to manufacturing to healthcare and now to construction. So
it's an obvious scenario.
It's a very linear path. I've always been, since my first job, a very avid reader. Actually, there was a period after my 4.5 years here where I didn't want to touch a book. But you
mean our undergrad would keep reading out of you?
Maybe a little bit. No, it's just heavy, right? But the man I ended up working for in that first job was an avid reader, and he re-inspired me to just pick up everything. And you know what else? He gave me permission to not finish bad books, which was awesome, and I really appreciate that about him. But so I had read a lot, so I knew a lot of theory, and the stories that go with that is helpful. But then when I got into this leadership role, it was, I didn't have healthcare background. So I was coming in with my transferable skill set, understanding people and how to relate to people, knowing enough about marketing and the disciplines I was supposed to be leading, to be credible, right? But getting those folks to accept me and to believe that where we were headed, which was I wouldn't say it's a 180, but it was probably pretty close. In what we had to do, getting them to buy into that. So I learned a lot about how to actually make that happen. So I took the theory and the great things I read in these books and learned in my undergrad, and really applied it to people, real people. And
you learned, what of that stuff you could use and apply, and what maybe a little less so.
That makes for a nice diagram, right? we need to follow every diagram.
What was the split? Yes. Yeah. You mentioned that this boss taught you, empowered you to not finish bad books. Talk about that. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I have this, again, this would be the double-edged. It's a positive quality and a negative quality, this sense of commitment. Right. I am all in on just.
You started this book, doggone it, you ought to finish this book.
Right. That's right. Even if it was a rental from the library and there was no cost associated, nothing, right? It just, this sense of, I have to finish it. I have to be done.
You're not a quitter.
Right. See, this is it. And he said, you know what? There are billions of books out there and so many things to learn. Why stick with something that just isn't inspiring you? Right. And I don't know if he realized it at the time, but that gave me permission to just, we're going to move on to that. I'll read 100 pages in. I had to give enough time to see if I really, because sometimes they're just slow starters, but
right.
I ended up applying, to my entire life. I didn't realize it at the time, but I do now. I don't chase perfection. I chase excellence. Perfection, that's not a game. No one can win that, right? So why set up that way?
Okay.
And so I look toward excellence, and there is commitment implied in that. And that's been my happy place. And I can be comfortable with that. It's not, I don't have to be perfect at anything, because again, that's a zero-sum game. I'm not going to win that.
Right.
And so how can I be excellent, show commitment to things, be all in without going overboard?
So you've applied you don't have to finish bad books to work stuff.
To life.
To life.
To life stuff, right? There is a point of diminishing return in just about everything you do. And so finding that and not going beyond that, I think is something I've learned, certainly.
Cool.
The Master of Business Administration program at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh is strategically designed to provide high-quality instruction in an understandable and applicable format. In many cases, the program takes a team teaching approach, where award-winning faculty are paired with industry experts to provide balanced coverage of advanced business concepts. Faculty present course material from an academic perspective, and industry experts illustrate how the material applies in the professional world. Learn more about UWO's no GMAT required results-driven curriculum at uwo.sh/MBA and position yourself for your next opportunity. That's uwo.sh/MBA. It's time to achieve more.
What are you reading now?
What am I reading now? Well, this is a little embarrassing, but I did just finish a John Grisham book. It's not super intellectual or anything, but it's fun. But generally I've reread a lot of business books, my Dale Carnegie kinds of books, right, a number of times. And so those are, when I have in between times, that's where I generally go. I do like podcasts a lot. I do Freakonomics and things like that.
Cool.
Are just fun. So I have usually 3 or 4 books going at a time.
I understand. And there's nothing wrong with reading for pleasure.
Yeah.
Related to that, you've clearly got a lot going on in life. You've got, you're married, you've got children that are chewing up lots of time. You have a job which chews up lots of responsibilities, and you could probably work on doggone near 24/7 and have something to do. So there's a lot of things that many folks would consider stressful, and leadership can be stressful. How do you take care of you? What do you do to make sure you're going to be good tomorrow?
That's a good question too. I'm in a job today with C.D. Smith Construction that I've been in for just 2 years. And I made this change for a number of reasons, but the primary one was because I was, for the first time in my life, I was cheating the person in the mirror. I knew that I was commuting a lot. I was driving an awful lot every day. And I realized that, my family is good. I am not going to cheat my kids, my husband, my work. I'm always giving 100%. That's not going anywhere either. So what's left is and I'm not proud of this, but my number of hours of sleep was at an all-time low. I was eating more meals in the car than I ever cared to admit.
And some of those were not the healthiest meals in the world.
Absolutely not. And my workouts I was still working out, but the intensity wasn't there and the duration wasn't there, right? So those are the kinds of things that long-term are going to affect me. And so this opportunity came up, and I looked at my husband, and I waffled because it's hard. It's hard to make a move like this. And he looked at me and he said, we love you. We want you here. Right. And so if this is going to mean better quality of life for me, for my family, this is what I'm going to do. And so my routine hasn't changed a lot, other than I've pulled out a lot of commuting. And so I can fill that time back up with running or other things to take care of myself. I'm an early riser, always have been, even in college when that was really uncool. But I work out in the mornings, and I do some reading, and I just kind of get things going. That's my me time. I'm not a night owl.
I can relate. Mm-hmm. Those things, having 2 or 3 things that you identified, the eating in the car, the getting your workouts in. Do you think it's important that leaders should have some of those things in their head as, okay, I'm crossing the line here. I'm no longer taking good care of me? Is that important in general?
I believe it is. I think it's use the airline metaphor. Secure your own oxygen mask before you do that for others.
I hadn't heard that, but that makes sense.
I think it's the same thing. I can only be so good for you if I'm only so good for me, right? If I'm taking care of myself, then, and again, it's kind of like back to that debit and credit situation. Every day isn't going to be ideal, just the way I scripted it. And that's okay. But if the net is pretty positive, then that's where we're going. People always ask me, well, how do you balance it all? I don't know that I balance it. I have harmony, right? I strive for harmony, and I completely support and agree with what your comment or your question is about. I think it's great. I think leaders need to take care of themselves in order to be there for their teams.
How do you make the distinction between balance and harmony?
Balance implies equity and equal, right? Like 50% here, 50% there. That for me, again, that's kind of perfection, ideal. That's not,
but it's not the reality you live in.
Harmony means, yes, some days at work are going to be very long, and I'm not going to make the musical or the game, right, for the kids. Other days, I'm going to be able to make sure I can get that 4:30 game in, right? It's all making sure that it all is working, but every day is not going to be templated, right?
Okay. So some days the workout's a little bit longer and it's a great workout. And some days, kind of a short workout, but
absolutely. It depends what's called for. You need to be there. Some things are flexible in terms of when you can do them, and other things are, nope, this is how this works. It's outside of my control. So I am all in on that.
Because this is what I need to do now.
Right. That's right.
Well, you talked about back in 8th grade that, to your surprise, you ran for class president, which raises a debate that we hear in leadership, that some people think of leaders as being born, that there's some people that are charismatic, etc., and they're just natural leaders. Other people would argue that leadership's a skill that you can develop. What do you think? Were you a born leader? Let's start there.
I don't know how to answer that, really. I can tell you that I was told, because I'm not extrovert and as charismatic as they come, that I would never be a leader. But then I looked at...
you were told that?
I was told that, yes. In my early 20s, actually. And I thought, okay, well, she's entitled to that opinion. It's not my own. Right?
You didn't internalize that one.
I did not internalize that one. Thankfully, I didn't, because I tend to internalize a lot of stuff. But I looked around and I actually did some research. This was maybe early Google stages, right? But there are a lot of amazing leaders in our history, in our current, that are introverts, even introverts, right? So I had this idea that you had to be some kind of an extrovert, over the top charismatic in order to be a leader. I just found not to be my truth, right? So I don't believe that's true. I think whether I was born a leader or you become a leader, I don't know that for sure. I think the situations that you're in, the experiences that you have, and the people that you meet help to shape all of that and maybe pull out certain qualities about you that may otherwise be snuffed out. I mean, had I chosen to listen to that person, maybe I wouldn't have aspired to the things that I aspired to, right?
Right.
But it doesn't mean that I didn't have those same qualities, right? They just wouldn't have manifested the way they did.
So I'm hearing that if I'm a young person maybe, who is an introvert, that shouldn't stop me from thinking of leadership as a possible route that I would take in life.
In my opinion, absolutely not. I mean, there's probably a study to back this up, but I wonder if there's something that says introverts and your ability to interact one-on-one with people, to our earlier conversation about making sure that I get you, I get you and I understand what makes you tick and what's going to inspire you to give the extra, right? Because I don't think I can motivate you, but I think I can inspire you to want to do more or to do certain things. And I think that one-on-one connection is really how you do that. So
I think you're right. And I will be doing a podcast at some point on this whole concept of what are the characteristics that make a great leader. And spoiler alert, the bottom line is there isn't a set of characteristics that makes a great leader. And almost all these characteristics can get to the point where it's not good. Mm-hmm. You can be an extrovert and charismatic, but to some point you're just a butterfly flitting around being charismatic, but you're not ever making sure we take the damn hill. You're not ever focused on the stuff. You're just bouncing around. So that can be certainly problematic as well. Mm-hmm. Okay. Good. Give me 5 words to describe you. we've got empathy on the list already. So I'll take empathy. We'll give you 4.
Yeah, right. Empathy. I would say I do have this sense of commitment. Like I am going to do it. I'm in. I am all in. I am going to follow through on whatever I say.
Empathetic, committed.
Yes. I think I'm a very passionate person.
Okay.
So when I'm all in and committed, it's easy for me to just, because I'm driven by that, I'm motivated by that. Gosh, I don't know. I haven't had this exercise in quite a while. I would say I have integrity. I do what I say that I'm going to do.
You had noted that as one of your sort of lines in making decisions.
Yes.
It's got to be ethically correct. Yep. And that's a go, no go for you.
Yes. Are we up to 5 yet?
No, we're at 4. But you said you weren't a math major, so we can count that as 5 if you want. We can be flexible here.
I think that just and motivated, intrinsically motivated. You know, I may do goal setting on January 1st, but I also might do it on February 12th. Whenever I need to do something, I'm wired to do that on my own.
To set a goal. Do you have a to-do list you keep?
I have several lists, but I do the most important.
Several?
Yeah, the most important ones to me are more like the goals and the outcomes and things like that, and I review those regularly. And yeah, I have a list that I can check off, and the to-dos, but I'm not wedded to that. That's more like, okay, I just make sure these things get done. But the bigger list of things that I look at every day, every week, about where I want to be and what kind of person I want to become, that's the list that matters to me.
Some have argued that you learn the most, not from the things that you initially do really well, but from things that maybe didn't work out so well. Mm-hmm. That to some extent, your failures, your struggles, your challenges can be great learning experiences. Are there any challenges that you've had in life that you'd be willing to identify and think about as, yeah, this was a useful learning experience for me? Didn't go as well as I'd like, but I learned something from it that was useful.
I think probably that some of around the things that I was describing to you earlier about being told what I could be or couldn't be, right? And starting to maybe believe that and wondering, should I believe that? In fact, I gave a talk a couple of months back about that, this secret I started keeping from my mother, right? And my mom, and she's an amazing woman, and we always shared, and I always taught her, even today, right? But went to college, got into this first job, and started keeping something from her. And what that was this creeping feeling of inadequacy, right? Like I wasn't quite good enough because of some of these things I was hearing, like, well, you're not charismatic enough to be a leader. And I started to, is that true?
You're starting to really question.
I was questioning.
You were
right?
internalizing.
And so I kept that from her. And that whole process, and once I realized I was keeping that from her, I thought, okay, this is obviously very bad because I don't really keep anything from her. And so I started to step back on that and kind of take it back in terms of, what do I believe here? What's my truth? And I think that's really probably the biggest learning experience and a turning point for me was when I realized these are just words and they're somebody else's opinion. It doesn't mean I need to own them.
So I'm hearing 2 things that were important. One is don't let other people define you. Mm-hmm. That, okay, somebody else defined you as not being charismatic enough to be a leader. Okay, as you put it, fine, that's your opinion, but it doesn't have to be mine. Mm-hmm. But the other feels like maybe a deeper truth that somehow you identified an internal compass that said, oh, if I'm not willing to share this with my mother, maybe that's a problem. That you had some ability to figure a line. Is there something there? What was that?
Yeah, that's really perceptive. Again, I wouldn't have been able to articulate at the time what you just said there so eloquently, but absolutely. If I can't tell her this when normally I would just give her everything, that must be a problem. I must be, because she raised me to be this empowered person, stand up for yourself. She was an educated woman, always empowered my sister and I and expected that we would do what we needed to do to help others and all of these things. And the reason I was keeping it from her is because I knew that what I was feeling ran counter to how she was raising me, right? Or how she had raised me.
So you knew if you went to your mom and said, hey, this person says I'm not enough of an extrovert to be a leader, she would have called.
Yeah, she would not have been a fan of that, right? So I realized at that point that, all right, yeah, if I can't share this with her, there's something off on that. Because I knew she would not not that she wouldn't approve, but she would be mad about that. Like,
Right.
Are you kidding me?
She would have straightened you out on
She
that.
might have straightened me out on that. She's not very big, but she might have straightened me out.
Well, it's interesting because it sounds like effectively the fact that you knew she was going to straighten you out caused you to straighten yourself out.
Right. I didn't need that conversation.
That's a great individual compass. Best leader you've ever known. Who would you in your career think of? Yeah, that was a really great leader. I learned stuff from them.
Oh boy, there are a lot of them. And all for different reasons, right? I mean, some of them are professional and you just look at him and you think, all right, that guy has got it figured out. He is empathetic. He is smart, has a whip and strategic and all of the things that you think of when you think of a leader, but he also really cares about people. There's that. I've learned a lot from not-for-profit leaders, people who do things because for the much greater good. They're not doing it for the money or for the kudos. They're doing it because there's somebody who really needs what they are trying to do. That has been helpful. There were a number of people at UW Oshkosh that helped me in terms of mentorship. That's a thing for me too, is making sure to identify mentors and people who can help you along your way and who you then in return can do something or add value or pay it forward later on. So there's been no shortage of those.
Talk about mentors. I often encourage young folks to have mentors. Mm-hmm. How did these mentors happen? How did you find them? Talk to me about mentor acquisition. Give people advice on mentors.
Mentor acquisition. Never heard of it thought of it that way. Have you ever heard of the yellow beetle syndrome?
No.
Okay. So it's this idea that, and it's not an original one. I read it in one of these books, but it's the idea that once you start paying attention and knowing once you know what you're looking for, you're going to see it, right? It's kind of like when you buy a new car, all of a sudden you see that same car everywhere. You hadn't been looking for it before, but now you are, and it's on your radar. Right. Kind of like that. So I mentioned I write, I make lists, I think, and that's how I process. And so I did that when I realized that I don't know how to get from here to there. I'm not even sure I understand where there is yet. Who might be able to, what kind of resources might I need to help with that? Sometimes I think these folks just kind of show up in your life. Maybe they're there anyway, but you weren't thinking of them that way. So I would say actually Sue Neitzel, Kane Institute, one of my early mentors. I've got some coaches that I would put in that category, teaching me life skills, and I still stay in touch with them, 20 plus years later. There are certainly some business mentors, and some are more situational or environmental, depending on where you are in your career. But then I have these, what I would consider kind of life coaches or life mentors, that they transcend any job and they just know me. Right. And so I think part of it is knowing what you're looking for and being open to people who come into your life who may be willing to. And I can't say I would always know it was a mentor. This person's going to be a mentor for me. Right. It's more to start a relationship conversation and see where that goes.
And the yellow beetle, they were, when that person came into your life, you were perceptive enough and open enough to say, yeah, that's a person that a relationship could be important for me.
Sometimes, yes, because I knew that, I lack here. I don't know what this is.
And they're good at it.
And they're really good at that. I see that. And maybe they'd be willing to share something with me.
Makes a lot of sense. What do you look for in a leader? So you've moved up the organizational hierarchy. You have to be around the table where there's a discussion of, do we promote person X or Y? Do we hire this person or that person for a leadership role? Mm-hmm. What tells you that someone, I think they could be a good leader?
Mm-hmm. Almost always it's who they are as a person, right? How do they treat people? Technical skills are very, very important. I don't want to ever discount that, but I don't think technical skills a leader makes, right? I don't think that just because it's kind of the old adage, just because you're a great salesperson doesn't mean you're a great sales manager, right? They're different skill sets. And so I think that's really a risk in a lot of cases, because somebody's really great at their work, and we want to recognize that by giving them giving them a promotion. And oftentimes a promotion means people reporting, direct reports, and that's not always the same skill set. So what I'm very careful to look for, and I've made mistakes here too, but what is that person like? How do they interact with others? Because I'm always saying, lead from where you are, and people will follow leaders, whether they have a title or not. Right? And so I'm always looking for that people side, the person side, the interpersonal skills side.
Okay. And that people will follow leaders, title or not. So you can identify the leader because they got followers.
Right. Many times. I mean, we have to make sure they're following for the right reasons, right? Because we probably all have situations where we've, just because that's fun doesn't mean that that person's a leader, but.
There's some interesting career advice in there that the person who might be a really great salesperson might not be a really great sales manager. Mm-hmm. How do you help people think about their career trajectory? So how does a person think of what makes sense as a next, if the logical up from a salesperson, sales manager, but how do you know? How do you know for you? How do you coach others in terms of where they ought to end up in an organization?
Another great question, because that's not always very clear, because you're right. Sometimes that career ladder says you do this and you do this and a little bit more, and then you do this and you have some people, and it doesn't always, it's more of it's a ladder based on discipline, technical discipline than anything else. And so I spend time in these situations talking to the person about, okay, why do they want a promotion? Why do they want to climb? Is it because of title, of money? What are those reasons? And then what are your real skills, right? And and not that people can't grow, because they can, but if I'm not a people person and I at all by any stretch to think that I'm going to be able to lead people effectively is maybe a challenge, right? May not be what I really want to do. I really just want that promotion because it's a title and or whatever, right? And so helping them to understand that, and depending on the organization, the size of the organization, the structure, you can be more creative or less with that, right? If I've got some great talent and somebody who I don't want to lose, I want to make sure to continue to give them challenging opportunities. I need to be creative as a leader to figure that out. So that's a little bit of a non-answer because it depends. It depends on the organization that you're in, but I think it's really a very direct, which comes when you have a trusting relationship conversation around, why are you wanting this? What are you great at? And what do you really want to do? Do you really want to be a leader of people? Or do you really just want more career opportunity, right?
Or more money.
Right.
And there may be some other way to get there.
Mm-hmm.
You're raising an interesting point there. A lot of folks think, I ought to be a leader. That career, mm-hmm. that's sort of the right thing to do, is to move up the organizational hierarchy. How do you think about that? You've moved up the organizational hierarchy. You've gained more responsibility. You have, in this process, people that you're managing. Is that always the right answer for people? Or is it okay to not want to be a leader?
I think it's okay to not be a leader. I think I'm more interested in, are people continuing to grow, right? I think growth can come in a lot of different ways. It doesn't mean if you don't become a leader, it doesn't mean you're not growing. So I think that's an important distinction for folks to make. And for myself, I've been through that as well. It's more about, am I continuing to learn? Am I continuing to add value and grow my skill set? That's growth also.
And if that's occurring, but it's not occurring in a direct report leadership sense, fine.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay. That's an important distinction. As you think about leadership over the years that you've been in an organization, and you're clearly not as old as I am, but this is not your first rodeo. Has leadership, the challenge of business, changed since you started in business? Is the world different in any fundamental ways from a leadership business perspective?
I think it would be easy to say yes, and I could probably build a case for that. But the way I'm approaching it and what I truly believe at my core is that the same things that inspired people or made them feel part of a team, feel valued. I shouldn't say this. The things aren't the same, but making people feel valued, making them feel a part of a team, making them feel relevant. Those are the same things people want today. I don't think that's really changed.
That's universal.
I think that's universal,
nature.
And I think that is decades, even more, centuries long in terms of what do people want. It's kind of the hierarchy of needs, right? It's just right above, food, water, shelter is that need to feel valued and need to feel part of something bigger. And I don't think in that sense, I don't think it has changed. I think how that manifests has changed, right? You can have the generational debate discussion about Well, when I started, it was all about how could I make a living? What kind of money could I make? Well, today, all the kids want time off. Okay, well, the values are different, but they still need to feel valued as part of a team in order to be a contributor to that organization. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. It was interesting as I watched you answer that question, I felt like I was watching, here's the logical, rational, data-driven answer, and here's what my gut is telling me. And you started with I could make an argument for, but no, my gut's telling me the answer is really someplace over here. Was that what was occurring?
Perhaps. I didn't even know that. But yes, probably. I mean, I do think that you could make an argument for in a case for with data that shows something different. But I think at the very root of it, I think it's simple. It's not easy.
The Cybersecurity Center of Excellence at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh is focused on solving tomorrow's problems today. Corporations and other businesses in Northeast Wisconsin can utilize the center for threat analysis, incident response assistance, cybersecurity awareness and training programs, and professional development for technical and other staff. Learn more about the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh Cybersecurity Center of Excellence at uwo.sh/cybersecurity. That's uwo.sh/cybersecurity.
Simple, but it's not easy. So there are basic principles in this that have lasted over time, going to stick around.
I believe so.
Implementing was hard, but...
Well, I think the root of it is in building trust.
And you keep coming back to trust into that relationship, to putting money into the checking account so that you can cash checks in the future in terms of those relationships. That seems to be a pretty basic part of how you figured out how to be a good leader.
Yes, I'm not a rocket scientist today. Never aspired to be one. But yeah, that is how I think. And it just is, it's how I simplify it. Again, it's not easy to do, but I think the tenets are pretty basic.
What advice along those lines would you give to new leaders, people that are starting out, maybe in their first management position where they've got a direct report or multiple? What advice would you give them?
I would say, don't try to be right all the time because you won't be. And if you double down on that, you just kind of look a fool. So talk to people, get advice and seek, see what other people think about things. Again, not to the point of consensus building and you never make a decision. That's not what I'm talking about. But don't be afraid to be wrong either. I don't think leadership is about having all the answers. It's about being able to get to the answers, by engaging the right people, by having the right conversations, by asking the right questions. It's not about coming in and saying, all right, this is it. These are all the answers.
I got it. I'm the daggone genius.
No, I'll go home. I don't think that's where the leadership is at.
And it's okay to be wrong.
It is okay to be wrong.
It's okay to start the book because you think it's a good idea and decide, nah, I don't like this book.
Well, some of the people that I work with will tell you one of my favorite words is pilot, right? Pilot. Let's pilot this.
Let's try
it. It has roots in entrepreneurism, right? Entrepreneurism. It's okay to try something. Act based on the information that you have and the vision that you have and what you know. But as new information comes in, don't be afraid to, all right, course correct on that. I just am not a fan of throwing good money after bad. And I think the pilot allows you kind of a safe way to try some of those things and keep the risk
bail
contained.
If you need to.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you think through now's the time to bail? Two parts of this. Let me go with the first part. How do you separate your ego from it enough that it's okay to bail? Because it was your idea. It was really cool. It's got your name on it. And how do you keep your ego from getting out of control?
Yeah, I read a quote by that. I think it was, never let your ego be so closely attached to an idea that the failure of an idea is a failure of you, right? And if you can internalize that, it's really easy to say, it's just another idea. They're a dime a dozen. Easier said than done sometimes, for sure. But if you have people around you who are willing to be real with you, that's another thing as a leader. It's sometimes difficult to know who's pandering and who's really got your back.
Right.
And so when you've got people who are willing to be straight with you, say, all right, this is something I'm really passionate about, so I'm going to need you to check me extra on this one because I might take it too far.
Okay, so am I hearing that one of the things you really value in, quote, a follower, people that are working with you, is that ability to have your back and look you dead in the eye and say, Holly, I think we're at the point where we need to pull the plug on this one. I think it turns out this is a bad idea.
I think that's worth its weight in gold.
And so you value that in a direct report. How do you encourage that?
By demonstrating that it's okay, that it's safe. one of my roles, I started, I was there probably for 3 or 4 months, and this woman came in and she was crying. And I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done?
This is not good.
This is not good. And
the very empathetic Holly was like, whoa,
wait a minute. I didn't sign up for this. But no, she was literally in tears. And I felt, what is wrong? It's okay. Let's just get this to neutral and then figure out. And she was crying because she made a mistake. And she was so afraid of what I was going to do, how I was going to react to that mistake.
You're a killer.
I think she was really afraid she was going to be fired. And we joke about it now, but I think she really was. And so I was able to demonstrate in that moment in real time that, oh yeah, no, this is not how this goes with me, right? You make a mistake. I make mistakes many a day.
Right.
It's okay. Did you do it with malintent? Well, of course not. Okay. Then let's just breathe through this one and we can assess and move on, but let's do that tomorrow.
And she owned the mistake as opposed to trying to hide it.
Oh, absolutely. She owned it, but then she knew that it was okay. She could tell me what I might not want to hear because she knew, I mean, that was one very obvious example for me where I know that's the moment that happened for us. Sometimes it's not quite as visible, quite as
right.
obvious, but in that moment she knew it was going to be okay. And that in the future, if she had something I wasn't going to like, that she could still tell me that and feel it was okay.
Yeah. That feels like it was a powerful moment.
Oh, very much.
In some ways for both of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. I thought, oh no, what have I done?
Because you had something way worse in mind than whatever this relatively minimal mistake was.
Absolutely. Because I remember saying, what else?
Right.
Nothing else. That's it. Isn't that bad enough? Like, no, okay.
Yeah. That's all there is. We're good. We're in great shape.
We're in great shape.
Daughters. Leadership. We live in a society where, unfortunately, we tend to think of males, white guys, as make sense as leaders. Mm-hmm. And that's who we more easily envision as leaders. And there's all kinds of fascinating research on this. How do you raise daughters to put that to the side and still believe that they can be good at roller skating and be class president and et cetera?
You bring forward my most proud accomplishments. That's another good question and something that we work on all the time, not directly, right? I'm never saying to them, you go out, be a leader because you can be. It's more the everyday interactions. Both of my girls are in competitive sports. They're gymnasts, right? So they're out there on a 4-inch balance beam. And if they come home and they have a hard day, I say, are you kidding me? You know what you do on even a bad day? And I think we talk a lot about how the things that they're doing every day those are life skills and those are their confidence. They're believing in themselves. Who in their right mind would go out on a 4-inch balance beam and do anything, much less backwards, no hands, whatever else, right? They have to believe in themselves in order to be doing that.
I just can't even envision. I can't envision doing on a flat floor, a mattress, right. What folks do on a.
So we talk about things like that and just
building their self-esteem,
building who you are and being comfortable in your own skin. Right. And I think we have a son as well. And I think some of the same conversations are had with him, right? Be comfortable with who you are. And I think today, raising children, of course, I haven't raised children before, so I have a hard time comparing, but I was one at one point. I think some of the temptations, the distractions, and the things are different. And so keeping them, building their self-esteem and their self-confidence. So when that push comes to shove, when that opportunity presents that they shouldn't take, that they're confident enough in themselves to say, I'm good. I'm going to go over here. That's all part of leadership and building self-esteem and their identity. So I think that's all part of it for us.
Well, and being a generation older, so having had the experience of raising the 6 kids that I had a hand in raising, and now working on the 5th of the grandchildren that I have, some very minimal, I think your universal is back to the point that there's an awful lot about being a parent that really hasn't changed over the last 30, 40,
lots of years,
50 years. Some of us have been at this. What's the hardest part of being a leader?
I think just there's a lot there. These are people, right?
Right.
Everybody's got something else, right? It's not just who they are when they show up at work, and always remembering that I think is important, because I might show up one day and be the best person ever to be around, and the next day I might show up and I'm not the best person today. And so remembering that how they show up at work is a compilation of everything in their lives. And there might be some sickness, there might be something with the kids, there might be something with finances, who knows, right? And just remembering that to show some grace with that, especially if this person has demonstrated consistently that they show up, they get it done, they're the right fit for this role in this company. And so when people have off days or off stretches, that you show them some grace and you offer help. Again, they're not always going to take it. They don't always want to share, but just showing that you're willing to have that conversation or to be there, whatever that means. I think that's one of the hardest parts, is remembering that, yes, you've got work to get done. I had this conversation the other day. I understand all these things you're throwing at me. Reality is I have a job to get done here. And so I need to figure this out, whether you're going to be a willing partner in this or if I'm going to have to find another way. It's happening. So how are we going to do this either together or this other way?
Right.
And then oh yeah, that's a good point. I know that these are all concerns for me, but you also have a job to get done. I respect that. Let's go forward.
And how do we balance all that?
Right. How do we make it a win-win both and?
What makes leadership fun? What do you enjoy about leadership?
People, the people. And it's all.
Your eyes just lit up as you answered that question.
The answer to all these questions is kind of the same. It's the people. And that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes it challenging. That's what makes it the most fun. And when you can win something as a team, coming off kind of a fun thing this morning that I learned. And yeah, there's a lot of energy around that. But there are a lot of people who put a lot of hard work into it too. And so having that success at the end of it's like winning the game kind of, and knowing that it took a team of people who just went after it because they all wanted it as much as you did.
Something cool happened at work today.
Yeah. Something cool happened at work today. So, and it's only not even noon. So the day is looking bright.
So are you going to celebrate that somehow?
At some point. Yeah. Not quite yet, but we will. And it'll be great because it's just, you need to take, that's it. Maybe that is a harder part too, is making sure you take the pause to celebrate the good stuff before you jump back into the grind, because the grind is what produces the good stuff. But taking that pause, because everyone is busy and most people want to get to the next, keep moving. They don't want to let anybody down. So taking that pause is also something that is a little tricky sometimes. Taking that pause to celebrate, to make another deposit into that checking account again, as you think of the building on. Mm-hmm. What didn't I ask you about leadership? You know what you didn't ask me about leadership that has been really important to me, and I think extremely pivotal, and I probably could have worked this in here more when you asked about some of my mentors and things like that, but volunteerism. So go on. I remember this very vividly. I was walking out of the MBA class with a friend I had made in the program, and she was also from Fond du Lac, so I live in Fond du Lac. And she very casually, very offhand said to me, I was just asked to join the YMCA board of directors. And I said, equally as casually, or so I thought, well, that's an organization I could get behind. That was it. End of discussion. And you thought it was a throwaway line. I thought it was, good for you. I'm happy for you. I hope that works out. I'll be a member still. And I don't know, fast forward just a couple of months and I get a phone call from the then CEO of the Fond du Lac Family YMCA. And he said, we're looking to fill a midterm opening on the board. We could use some support in our marketing efforts. Would you? I said, well, I don't even know what that means. I hadn't been on a real board yet until that point. And I said, well, sure, I'll meet with you. And so I met with him and I met with the then board chair, who was the CEO of Agnesian Healthcare. You might be able to see where this is going. And I agreed to join the board. Again, I didn't know, full disclosure, I really didn't know what I was in for. They thought I could help. I was young and naive. And I thought, if you think I can help, maybe I can. I'll try it. And so joined the board and for a couple of years was part of that. And then I was asked by the CEO or the chair of the board to go to lunch. So he was the incoming CEO of Agnesian Healthcare. Right? Okay. And I said, that's a nice offer, but I'm good. I got this other gig over here. I'm enjoying my work, because he had an opportunity he wanted to talk to me about. Right. And I just gotten done. We were at kind of hit a milestone in the company that I was with, and it was great. We'd been working for it. And then I settled into this other role that I was pretty happy with. Right. And he said, okay, Well, I didn't know him very well at the time, but he wasn't done. So a month or so passed, and he said, okay, it's not a question this time. We're going to lunch. All right. So we're going to lunch. And I affectionately refer to it now as the 2-year interview I didn't know I was on. Because I was on this volunteer board position, I ended up with some terrific, great career opportunities and some additional mentors. And so that's where I'm circling back to, is that volunteerism. I don't know that I could have understood this before, but there's no question that my return from volunteerism that I hadn't been looking for has been manyfold, right? I give what I can in terms of time and talent and treasure in some cases. But what you get in return for volunteering is just beyond anything you could ever think of. The relationships that you make, the opportunities that you have, the experience, skill building that you can do. I think for people, leaders or not, who are looking to grow, that's a great way to do it. I mean, I've gotten to be good at finance because I've been in a number of finance roles on boards, right? It's like, well, you better figure that out because you have fiduciary responsibility here. And so now I feel very comfortable with that, but I didn't come out of school thinking that that was a career path for me. I still wouldn't say it's a career path for me, but it's something I feel very comfortable with now.
You're better around the table having those conversations.
Right. And I probably wouldn't, I don't know how else I would have gotten that experience if not for these sports, right? As an example. And the people that you meet and just the causes that you're able to advance, to me is extremely fulfilling. So as far as leadership, I don't think it's only for leaders or people who aspire to leadership, but just as a person, as a contributor to society, it's enriched my life beyond measure.
So I'm hearing back to a circular a bit that you do things because of the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. Strong moral compass is important to you as a leader. But that strong moral compass has also been useful to you in your career. Mm-hmm. It's turned out that sometimes doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do has also turned out to be a good, useful thing for you in your career.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. I didn't know what I was in for, but I jumped in for what I thought were the right reasons, and it's turned out all right. So,
well, I want to thank you very much
for
participating in our podcast. I appreciate your time. The university appreciates your time. And it's always, particularly from a personal perspective, gratifying and really cool and rewarding when you see former undergrad student, former grad student who's now so, don't let this go to your head, but so successful, so polished, so well-spoken. And I don't know to what extent the university deserves any of that credit, but it's kind of cool to see where people end up. Yeah. So thank you for sharing your story. It was fun to listen to.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking. It's been great to be here.
Very good.
I would definitely say the university has a role to play in there. So
very good. Thank you very much.
It's Time is a production of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business graduate programs in association with Venture Project Studios. Executive producer, Aaron J. Armstrong. Host, Professor Dale Feinauer. Creative director, Madison Potratz. Director of photography, Elazar Kloon. Audio and video editor, Elazar Kloon. Marketing strategy, Tara Larson. Social media, Anwar Mahana. A special thanks to L Creative, Top View Media, Michael Patton, and the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business graduate programs.